G'day! My name's RJ, and welcome to Killer CANUCK, a recurring segment here on RUE MORGUE TV. Following the box office success of Prom Night in 1980, producer Peter Simpson was looking to cash in again during the tax shelter era. What he ended up with, however, was not the cut-and-dried slasher he was hoping for. Let's take a look at 1983's Curtains. Simpson turned to Richard Ciupka to direct a script from Prom Night scribe Robert Guza Jr. A DP by trade, Ciupka had stepped in to direct the final two scenes of a previous film, Melanie, for SimCom, Peter Simpson's production company, after Simpson and the prior director had a verbal blowout on the set. Simpson told Ciupka that with Curtains, he just wanted another prom night, plain and simple, but the newly minted director had other plans.
Born in Belgium and emigrating to North America at a young age, Ciupka's rise through the cinematic ranks was fast. He became a director of photography at only 26 due to some in-camera special effects training that he had. In 1977, he shot the Ivan Reitman-produced Ilsa, The Tigers of Siberia, and by 1980, he was behind the camera on Louis Malle's Best Picture nominee Atlantic City, starring Burt Lancaster and Susan Sarandon. Ciupka accepted the role of directing begrudgingly, mostly just to prove that he could do it. With a budget of just under $4 million, which was pretty good for Canada at the time, Curtains went into production just a few short months after Melanie, and shot from October until December.
The project was instantly plagued with production problems. Things would go wrong on set, actors would be hours late because of snowstorms, Peter Simpson outright replaced a cast member. And on top of it all, it took Richard Ciupka some time to shift from focusing on lighting and composition to dialogue and performance. After 2 weeks of shooting, he was already a few full days behind schedule.
Furthermore, the product that Ciupka was delivering was radically different from what Simpson had wanted. Ciupka's style was far more art house than Prom Night, and the careful, deliberate pace that he was implementing was in stark contrast to the hack-and-slash speed that he had been asked for.
When Ciupka handed over what he had when principal photography had wrapped, Peter Simpson was furious. He didn't even have a feature-length film. What good is half a movie, he said. It's like having half a car.
The film was shelved, Ciupka stepped away from it, and none of the cast thought the movie would ever see the light of day. It sat for over a year and a half until Peter Simpson decided to do reshoots that he would direct personally. An entirely new ending was shot, new death scenes were shot, and new character backstory was shot. Ciupka's film still exists somewhere in the middle, but it's bookended by Peter Simpson's reshoots.
So when you watch this movie, or even this video for that matter, and at times it feels like you're watching two entirely different films, that's because you are. Even the credits are split into two sections. Act 1 is Ciupka's work, and Act 2 is Simpson's.
The curtains open and famous actress Samantha Sherwood runs lines for Audra, a film where she is to play the titular role. Sherwood is played by Samantha Eggar, who genre fans will no doubt recognize as Nola Carveth from David Cronenberg's The Brood. She is interrupted and given notes by her director and close personal friend, Johnathan Stryker, played by Saskatchewan actor John Vernon, who of course played Mooney in Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Ciupka had worked with Vernon previously on the 1980 film It Rained All Night the Day I Left. Ciupka originally wanted Klaus Kinski for this role, and I'm sure his predominantly female cast were very thankful that it didn't work out that way. The pair visit an asylum run by Dr. Pendleton. When Stryker explains to the doc that Audra has been shelved and that Sherwood's time in front of the camera is over, she flips out and tries to stab him before she's wrapped up in a straitjacket. But it's just a prank, bro. Sherwood getting committed is just part of their plan to get her more in touch with the character of Audra. What follows is some extremely 80s depictions of mental illness and Sherwood actually starting to lose herself. Slowly, Stryker stops coming to visit her as she descends more and more into apparent madness. That is, of course, until she reads in the newspaper that Stryker has decided to shoot Audra without her, instead holding an audition for 6 chosen women up at his secluded mansion. Hungry for revenge, Sherwood escapes the asylum to claim what is hers. We have our setup, so let's meet the players. Stryker has invited 6 women to audition for the part of Audra. Among them is veteran actor Brooke Parsons, played by Toronto actor Linda Thorson, known to many for her turn in the series The Avengers from the late 60s.
This character was originally to be played by Montreal actor Celine Lomez. This is the actor who I mentioned was fired by Peter Simpson, who didn't much care for her acting choices, nor her thick French-Canadian accent. The entire production was put on hiatus for a full week while they searched for her replacement.
We meet ballet dancer Lorian Summers, played by actual National Ballet of Canada dancer and choreographer Ann Ditchburn. Tara DeMillo, played by Sandy Curry, who genre fans might recognize from her role in Terror Train. Professional skater Christy Burns, played by Toronto actor Leslie Donaldson, who had a streak of horror films in the early 80s, consisting of Funeral Home, Happy Birthday to Me, and Deadly Eyes. Young actor Amanda, played by Deborah Burgess, and stand-up comedian Patty O'Connor.
Have you ever wanted something so badly you would do anything for it?
Played by Toronto actor Lynn Griffin, who, lucky for her, spends no time searching for the cat this time around, and so gets to live past the first act.
He was in and out in 24 seconds.
Griffin had actually done a screen test for Atlantic City for the role that went to fellow Torontonian Hollis McLaren, and this screen test was shot by Ciupka.
Lynn Griffin actually wrote this stand-up routine entirely herself, and they filmed it live in front of an audience at a Yuck Yucks comedy club in Toronto.
Amanda is home alone running her lines for the part when she hears something in the next room. She heads to investigate but gets grabbed and stabbed by a killer wearing an instantly iconic old hag mask. She hoped she would make first string, but got cut before the game even started. The hag steals Amanda's doll that's doing its best Florence Pugh impression before fleeing. The 5 remaining women all gather at Johnathan Stryker's house and exchange introductions over the dining table. At this point, I expect Tim Curry to show up with Mr. Body, but instead, Stryker walks in and explains the details of their audition. The 5 of them are to spend the weekend while they each compete for the part. Here we see the deliberate pace that Ciupka was trying to achieve. This is actually the first scene that he shot, and it feels more like Agatha Christie than Sean Cunningham. The cinematography for Ciupka's footage was done by Robert Painter, who would, right after this film, hop onto a little movie called An American Werewolf in London for John Landis.
The interiors for curtains were shot mostly at the former Magder Studios in Toronto, which through the 80s and 90s housed sets for films like 1983's A Christmas Story, 1990's The Freshman, and of course, SCTV.
The instructional rendezvous is interrupted by the uninvited Samantha Sherwood. Leslie Donaldson and Lynn Griffin recall that Eggers was pretty distant on the set and didn't really hang out with the rest of the cast, but they say that she was much warmer towards everyone during the reshoots. Stryker allows her to stay and compete for the role. After dinner, everyone separates throughout the house. Patty and Brooke head back to their bedrooms for a drink and a bit of ventriloquism.
Oh, boy, you give great head.
Christy asks around if anyone has seen her new skates. Samantha and Stryker argue in his bedroom, and Tara has a bit of fun in the hot tub with the estate's caretaker, Matthew. Matthew is played by Toronto actor Michael Wincott, known to genre fans for Alien Resurrection and The Crow, but I will forever recognize him as the voice of the original Prophet of Truth from Halo 2. The next morning, Christy heads out to the local ODR to work on her skating, leaving her twig and puck behind in lieu of a boombox.
Now, if you know anything about this film at all, it's this scene, which is probably one of the most beloved in Canadian horror history. Actor Leslie Donaldson actually had no idea of the film's cult status until it hit VHS and started circulating late night TV in the 90s, when she started getting phone calls about it from fans.
Christy places the boombox in the snowbank and practices her routine to the tune of You Saved My Soul by Burton Cummings. Donaldson had 3 professional ice skating trainers, as well as choreographer co-star Ann Ditchburn help her practice for this scene until she had the routine down pat. But on the day, the ice on the lake was rough, so she actually face planted and cut her chin open, forcing the crew to resort to using an ice skating stunt double for the actual routine, while Donaldson got tended to by the medic. In fact, on her close-ups, you can actually see where they covered up her cut with makeup. The music cuts suddenly and Christy examines the boombox. After popping the batteries out, she discovers Amanda's doll buried in the snow. She hears a voice cross the frozen lake, a voice from the end of a leaf, saying, "You won't die of 1,000 fakes or be beaten by the sweetest of deeks." The hag, rocking the stolen new skates and brandishing a sickle, lumbers across the ice towards a shocked Christy, who screams and tries to escape.
The hag in the scene is actually played by the stunt double that performed Christy's routine, which is probably why she catches up to her so easily, despite the fact that she's supposed to be a professional skater.
The hag takes a few swipes at Christy as she crawls away in the snow. She manages to pierce her shoulder before being bludgeoned by the doll. Christy takes a few notes from Sidney Prescott in Scream 2 and uses this moment to escape the unconscious killer without checking to see who it is. She hoofs it through the snow and skates, stumbling all over the place, yeah, we've all been there, and leans against a tree to catch her breath. But she manages to choose the one tree in the forest the hag was hiding behind, so she's grabbed and swiftly decapitated. The next day, the remaining women sit in a studio with Stryker. He tells them that Christy left him a note saying that she was leaving. Samantha enters and Stryker makes an example of her, telling her that she has to act without the benefit of her beauty. He throws her the hag mask and forces her to act while wearing it.
Now seduce me.
She sits there dumbfounded in the mask for a moment before Stryker rips it off.
This is a mask too.
Meanwhile, Matthew necks a bottle of vodka and goes out for a brap in the woods. Later that day, Stryker meets with Patty. Lynn Griffin recalls that this purple sweater that she's wearing was actually knit for her by her mother. Stryker tells her that she's wrong for the part, but Patty tries to prove him wrong with a radical tonal shift.
Now you're telling me I'm wrong for the part. Why? Because I haven't got a staple through my navel like that centerfold? Because I wouldn't pirouette into bed with you and skate on your face?
Man, I almost forgot that I just watched a chase scene on skates. That night, Brooke runs lines in bed. What, was she gonna sleep in stilettos? She heads to the bathroom to paint her nails and accidentally spills some nail polish on the toilet seat. She wipes it off and lifts the lid and reveals Christy's head floating in the bowl.
This is actually actor Leslie Donaldson's head and not a prosthetic. They brought in a toilet, a new one, thankfully, and cut a section out of the front big enough so the actor could just lay on the floor and poke her head through. They framed the shot so you couldn't see the front of the toilet and used chicken skin and makeup on her neck to make it look more believable.
Brooke reacts appropriately, but Stryker just shuts her down immediately. You can make a dummy out of yourself, but you're not gonna make a dummy out of him. It doesn't help matters when they come back and there's nothing in the toilet. It really doesn't help matters when Stryker slimily uses Brooke's fear to his advantage and seduces her, and it really doesn't help matters when Samantha catches them in bed together. Elsewhere in the house, Lorian practices her dance, something that Ditchburn did in practically all of her film and television roles. She must go into flow state or something because she's so involved in her routine that she doesn't notice that the hag sneaks into the room and stabs her to death right in the middle of it.
In earlier drafts of the script, the character of the hag was written to be a 500-year-old banshee with practical makeup effects done by Greg Cannon, whose resume includes The Lost Boys, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Exorcist 3, but for whatever reason they didn't go through with it, so Cannon made it a mask instead.
Just then, someone barges into Stryker's room with a pistol and shoots both him and Brooke point blank. They stagger back and fall out the window. Brooke lands face down dead in the snow, but Stryker careens through the window of the library on the floor below, terrifying Tara, who just happened to be looking around in there.
Now, if you're thinking, the physics on that make no sense, yeah, you're absolutely right. This window crashing was originally shot to be part of Matthew's death scene. He was initially scripted to be killed while on the snowmobile, which would then crash through the wall. You can actually see the front of the machine in that shot if you look closely enough. However, after the reshoots, the footage was reused for Stryker's death scene.
With her director defenestrated and skewered right in front of her, Tara sees no reason to stay at the mansion. She starts her escape circuit by seeing Matthew's dead body floating in the hot tub, having been killed off screen in a much more boring manner than ripping the sled through the wall. She gets into her car, forgetting that she's in an 80s horror movie, and it obviously doesn't start. She takes shelter in Stryker's prop shed, which is about the size of a second house, looking for a means of escape. She runs the gauntlet of creepy mannequins, props, and costumes before she comes across a taxi cab. She opens the hood, but the engine is missing. Oh, wait a minute, did she think that this prop cab in the middle of a shed was going to be operable? She slams the hood and we get a dramatic reveal of the hag sitting in the back of the prop cab. Wait, did the hag think that Tara was going to be able to use this prop cab to escape? Why do so many people think that this thing is going to run? The hag attacks and the chase is on, but luckily for Tara, the killer learned stalking from the Ghostface handbook and pratfalls all over the place while trying to catch her.
This entire chase scene was added by Peter Simpson. You could probably tell what with the hag slamming into walls and running in slow motion. The sets they had built for the initial shoot were long destroyed, and the one they decided to use was very small and difficult to work in.
Eventually, Tara ends up at a dead end after discovering Lorian's body and decides to hide in an air duct. She waits a few moments until she thinks it's safe before she starts to crawl out, but the hag grabs her from the other end of the vent and drags her kicking and screaming into an off-screen kill. Our final girls meet in the kitchen and bond over a bottle of champagne. Lynn Griffin recalls that she was intimidated by Samantha Eggar because she had loved the film The Collector. They joke with each other until Samantha reveals that she shot and killed Stryker because, yeah, obviously. But the twist comes when Patty reveals that she has been the hag the entire time,
They're dead too.
killing off all the other women so that she could have the role of Audra for herself. In an emotional rage, Patty stabs Sherwood to death with a chef's knife, and the movie ends with a shot of Patty performing the same stand-up that she opened the film with.
You ever wanted something so badly you'd do anything for it?
But she gets no laughs from the other patients at the asylum. An alternate ending had been scripted and shot, with Patty having dragged all the bodies onto the stage from the opening sequence and performing the monologue from Audra there. But it was changed because Peter Simpson's wife thought it was too unbelievable, even for a horror movie. Did she miss the part where John Vernon flew out a second-story window into a first-story window? The film released in 1983, 3 full years after principal photography began, to bad reviews and a short theater lifespan. Though, it would find new life much later on VHS and late-night circulation.
Peter Simpson continued producing until he passed away in 2007, mostly horror and thrillers, including all 4, yes 4, original Prom Night movies. Richard Ciupka stripped his name from the picture and replaced it with Johnathan Stryker, the name of the director from the film, a fun alternative to Alan Smithee, and after his experience on Curtains, wouldn't direct another feature for 10 years. Until next time, I've been RJ, this has been Killer Canuck, and thanks for watching. Hey folks, RJ here. Thanks for watching this episode of Killer Canuck. Just want to give a huge thanks to the folks at RUE MORGUE for hosting this series on their channel. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at RealKillerCanuck. If you like the tune playing in the background, be sure to check out Prodigy on SoundCloud and over at noiserecords.com. There'll be a link in the description below. Let me know if there's a Canadian horror film you think I should cover. Until next time.